When there's a film about one of the possibly greatest actors of all time, you just have to watch it. Let's talk about the unbearable weight of massive talent. Hi, my name's Drew and welcome to another review video on Flying Wiener. Now, I like Nicolas Cage. It's impossible to talk about this film without liking Nicolas Cage, or at least without mentioning him. I'm not a big super fan, so unfortunately I have not seen all of his films. There are actually quite a few that are still on my list. Quite high above them is Pig, which came out a few years ago, which I've heard a lot of good things about. I somehow can't manage to find the time to watch it, but I am generally a fan of his. One of the best performing videos on this channel was actually a review I did for Leaving Las Vegas, which is obviously one of his best known, really dramatic roles, and I highly recommend it. I'll actually leave a link to that video, to my review video of that film. I'll leave it at the end of this video so you can click on that if you want to. I mean, it's a really incredible film. Not easy to stomach, but it is great if you can put up with it. So, you might or might not have heard of this film. It was definitely on my radar last year. I didn't manage to get to the cinemas to see it, just like a lot of people. Unfortunately, financially, it wasn't a big success or anything, but it definitely deserves to be. It's such a weird and wacky thing. It's actually quite difficult to imagine this film without it being centered on Nicolas Cage, because it just fits so well. I feel that this film is actually operating on very many different levels that I don't quite get, you know. Not being such a sophisticated person, but there's definitely a lot to unpack here. But yeah, I suppose before we get too much into it, I should maybe tell you about the plot. What is this film even about? Now, this film is actually about Nicolas Cage, but not the one we know. It's a fictionalized version of Nicolas Cage, who did do the films that we know he did in reality, but like I say, it's a fictionalized version of himself. What happens is that he's getting kind of a bit disappointed in the film industry, and you know, he's not getting the jobs that he would want to have. He's got this voice in his mind, which is basically a young Nicolas Cage who's just flamboyant and loud and everything, and in a leather jacket, and he's like, you know, you have to chase the good old days, you be an action star and all these things. You were an action star and look what you're doing now, etc, etc. At the same time, Nick is not doing too well with his family. He's got an ex-wife and a daughter, or soon-to-be ex-wife, whatever. And yeah, the relationship is very strained, and so he decides, right, he has to, you know, do something to affect his life, to change his life, and so he's going to stop acting. That's the big thing that happens here. He's going to stop acting. He's just going to commit to one more thing that he's signed on for, which is for him to go to this place where there's this rich person. He is played by Pedro Pascal. You'll probably have seen him in the promotional material if you've seen anything about this film. And he's a big Nicolas Cage fan, and you know, and he wants to meet him and talk about a possible film project, because he's written a script and he wants Nicolas Cage to star in it. That's the main thing. So he flies off to visit him, and I'm thinking about briefly what I'm going to tell you, what else I'm going to tell you. I mean, what I can briefly tell you is that, so the two of them meet, and so he's like, nah, I'm going to stop acting, etc. Obviously, Javi is his name, played by Pedro Pascal. You know, he's a bit distraught. He's like, oh, but you know, you're Nicolas Cage, you're the best actor ever. And we see he's collected all this memorabilia surrounding Nicolas Cage from old films, like he's got these golden pistols from the film Face Off and all these kind of items. It's really funny. And something happens. I'm not going to tell you because it would be a spoiler, but let's say that Javi isn't quite who we think he is. So something happens, and it just the story just turns into something a bit different from that point on. The two do agree to collaborate. I'm just not going to tell you in what way. And yeah, the story goes from there. Like I say, I really don't want to tell you anything more about what the plot is actually, because it would take away yeah, I would take away the effect it has because it is rather surprising and it is interesting to see this. But it's definitely very fun, so that's the basic thing. So we've got fictionalized Nick Cage who wants to quit the acting business and he sort of does one last gig, let's call it that, okay? He's got one last job and that's what this film is about. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that this is working on so many layers, it's got so many layers, it's working on so many different levels, because it's so many things at the same time. If you just appreciate Nicolas Cage for who he is and the big meme that he is nowadays, this film is a riot. It's so much fun because it sort of really plays into all of these cliches or things that we think about Nicolas Cage and how he might be, a bit of an exaggerated person and all these kind of things. I'm sure for him it must have been a very weird experience, but he obviously had fun playing this. So we've got that, then we've got the constant sort of nostalgia glasses on because we're constantly reminded of things that Nicolas Cage has done, which, let's say, we as a collective have enjoyed quite a lot of. So you've got that. At the same time, it's kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of trying to be a parody of your typical, okay, slightly spoiler, action stuff here because there are action sequences in this film, but if I recall correctly, you see some of that in the trailers as well. So it's sort of also making commentary on how the film industry has developed, these action stars from the 90s, what's happened with them, and, how are these films made. That's the one part of it, but it's also just genuinely funny. I had to laugh so much during this film, and that is especially down to the chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal. So they have found a magnificent pair of actors to work together here on screen. It's just so much fun watching it. The Javi is as this idolizing Nicolas Cage, which probably happened in reality. I could imagine. Pedro Pascal by now is a big star himself, but still, I'm sure when he was there, he's like, I can't believe I'm doing this with Nicolas Cage, because it must have been so much fun. And like I say, for Nicolas Cage himself to sort of examine, because it is fictionalized, but of course the films are his actual films, so I'm sure that involved a lot of self-reflection and thinking about his career and how he is perceived by audiences. A lot of it is quite tongue-in-cheek. So it is quite obvious that he is aware of his, let's call it, reputation or how people see him. And I think that's wonderful because why not? Just dip into that. I love when people can sort of, ride along with everything when it's, in good taste and not meant. Because when we meme about Nicolas Cage, it's not because we dislike him, it's the contrary. It's because we love all the weird and wacky things that he sometimes does. It's just brilliant. So yeah, so you've got this wonderful humour that carries the film along, and it genuinely looks amazing. So it is a really well shot film. We've got all these lovely, I quite forget where it is they go. Is it Mallorca they go? I'm not quite sure anymore, but I seem to believe it's in somewhere in Europe where Javi's got his big mansion, and it just all looks so wonderful. It's shot so beautifully. So that is also very funny when you think about the the actual story of the film being, the film industry and an actor sort of wanting to give it all up, and at the same time the whole thing just feels like a really well-made film because it just looks and feels like it from start to finish. So there's a lot in here, and like I say, a lot I'm not going to touch on because I don't want to spoil it, because it is a lot more fun when you discover, because there's some twists and turns, like, is this where they're going with this story? You're like, how is that going to work? And it works. So it is a really well-constructed film. The story itself, while it has its surprises, it all fits into the story rather well. And like I say, there's a lot of commentary sort of left on the table here that I don't feel myself educated or sophisticated enough to completely dissect. I'm not the video essay guy who, does a YouTube video for over an hour. I don't have that kind of perception, So unfortunately, I'd love to, but no, but you can. Even without that, it was just so much fun watching this, because when you think about it, it works as a character story, it works as a sort of action film, it works as a sort of parody, let's call it. It works as a sort of buddy cop film as well. Not the cop stuff, but this kind of having two guys working together, being buddies. It works on all sorts of levels. It's just really well put together. I was quite surprised. I was expecting to like this film, but it really, really did surprised me in the best of ways. So it's a high recommendation, especially if you have seen Nicolas Cage, if you know the memes, if you like the memes, if you liked his past films, particularly, you know, when he was huge in the 90s and the early 2000s, you really should watch this because it's fun, and it's not even a very long film, so it's nice and compact. Good decision there to keep, you know, to not overstay, you know, your welcome. It really works. So high recommendation for me. Watch this if you can at any point. That will be all from me today. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe. It is the best way to support this channel. Leave a comment down below about anything Nicolas Cage related. Nick Cage, the legend, really. But anything you want to say about this film or anything you liked, or tell me about those layers that I, you know, didn't mention or could be explored further. I think it's all really well put together. I'll leave a link up here, like I say, to my review of Leaving Las Vegas, which is an incredible film that Nicolas Cage, if I'm not mistaken, won an Oscar for. It's been so long since I looked at that film, but I think, yeah. And Elizabeth Shue, I think she didn't get one, she should have got one in my opinion. I think that's what it was. I think they both deserved one. Anyway, I'll leave that link up here. I'll thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one on Flying Wiener. Take care.